Hello everyone. Hope you are doing well. I am your instructor Akshay Parmar from ITIC department of LJ Institute of Engineering and Technology. Welcome to the video tutorial series of the Internet of Things. And in this today's session, we are going to discuss about an application of the IoT, right? So first of all, we will see the common architecture for the IoT, any IoT application, right? So which kind of architecture that IoT application is having, that we are going to discuss, and after that we are going to pick one IoT application. And in this session we are going to pick that in the healthcare industry, right? So in the healthcare industry, where we can use an IoT, and what is its factors, that we are going to discuss in this today's session only, right? So let's start with a common architecture of an IoT application, right? So using IoT we can build a many application, right? But here few of the IoT applications where we are going to discuss in this particular series, right? So we will cover the following topics for the IoT application. First of all, we will see the general overview, right, or general practice for that any IoT application. After that, we are going to see that importance of the IoT in that particular field, right? So why we need an IoT, why we need an IoT application for that particular field, that we are going to discuss that thing, right? So the importance of the IoT we are going to discuss in each and every section. For embedding any sectors with an IoT, the some of the basic requirement we need, right? So what kind of material and what kind of facilities that we are going to provide with the help of the IoT, we are going to discuss in the requirement section, right? After that, the functional block diagram, the how that particular things is working with the help of the IoT, right? So we can say that the architecture of the IoT that we are going to discuss, and the how it works, right? So general working of an IoT application, that is also we are going to discuss in this particular series, right? So before we explore them one by one, let's understand the common architecture that all the IoT application is having, right? So let's see the common architecture for the IoT application, right? As you are all aware about, right? So what is the starting point of any IoT application? The IoT application is start from the sensors, right? So here the sensor nodes are sensing the data from its surrounding, or we can say that from its environment. The sensor, the node is sensing the physical property, right? So we can say we can have any of the sensory node, right? So all kind of sensors such as GPS sensor, temperature sensor, and all that thing. After that, the another type of the device which is sensing its surroundings and actuator nodes, right? So there, what do you mean by the actuator nodes, right? So you are aware about the relay, the alarms, the motors, that are the actuators, right? So light indicators and all that things are come under the actuators field, right? So they are after sensing the data, right? After sensing data, what they are doing, they are storing that data somewhere, right? So mainly they are storing the data on the cloud service, right? So we are taking an help from the cloud service, right? So with the help of the internet, they are connected with a cloud service, right? So that cloud service is at the central and the remote, right? So they are the cloud service is providing a storage the location, as well as they are helping us to analyze that data, right? So with the help of the cloud service we can store the data, as well as we are analyzing the data too, right? After storing and analyzing data, we can remotely monitor that data too, right? The remote monitoring, or we can say that the caretaking or the emergency help team that monitors that data with the help of the remote monitoring, right? And with the help of the cloud services we can have a data analytics tool, right? So for the research and the analysis purpose or the decision making purpose, we can use that data analytics tool also, right? This is the general architecture, right, of the any IoT application, right? In the some of the architecture we are having a mediators too, right? So after sensing the data, the sensor node and the actuator nodes are giving that command or giving that sensors sense data to the controls node, right? So they are connected with the link, right? That control nodes are connected with an fog or the local computer, right? So whenever you are requiring a local storage device, right? So at that time that controller node is taking care of that, right? So that controller node is connected with a local computer, and the local monitoring is done on that local computer or the fog computer, right? So in this in the house monitoring system or the caretaker is taking care of that particular system with the help of that local monitoring itself, right? So within any organization for a local analytics processing and the controlling decision, we are having these kind of module too, right? So this local analysis particular module or the analysis or processing or the control section will not be there in the many IoT application, right? But they are have in so many IoT application is there, right? So that's about a general overview about an IoT architecture, right? So let's see the part of each and every module in this particular architecture, right? So how it's work, right? So general architecture of the IoT. So here we are having an sensors and the actuators, right? So all the sensors and the actuator node should be placed at an appropriate place, right? So with the help of that, by the placing at the appropriate place, we can trace its surrounding, right? So the sensors and the actuator node should have an proper connectivity with the controller nodes or direct to the cloud server, right? So after sensing the data, we need to store that data somewhere. So the sensor node and actuator node should be have a proper connectivity with the controller or the direct connection with the cloud server with the help of the internet, right? So without that connectivity, that sense data will that sense data will not go to the controller or the cloud server, right? And without that, we cannot take any precautionary step with that, right? After that, the sensor node sends that sense data to the controller nodes or directly to the cloud with the help of the internet, right? So what is the role of the controller node, right? So it is collecting the data from the sensor, right? So that controller is collecting the data from the sensor, right? The sensor is sensing the surroundings physical property, right? Which is the sensor that we have used, that is depend on that, right? After collecting the data, that controller is applying some business logic as per its requirement. After applying that some business logic, right, it is send it to the fog or the local computer or directly to the cloud server for the storage purpose or the analysis purpose, right? So that is the basic task of any controller, right? After that, all the controller nodes should have an connected within fog or the local computer or the directly within cloud server via internet, right? So that controller is sending the data for that controller is sending the data to the local server or the cloud server for the storage purpose only, right? So let's see what is the role of an fog or the local computer, right? So that fog or the local computer that are receiving all the data from that controller nodes, right? And that controller nodes is getting the information with the help of the sensor sense data, right? After receiving that data, that particular local computer is executing some of the business logic with respect to that our application requirement. After that, after executing some of the business logic, right, the local computer is doing an analysis, right, on the collected data, right? They are doing and some of the analysis task on that collected data from the sensors, right? After that, it is sending that filter limited data to the cloud or the any kind of the devices, right? So after analyzing the data, they are shortlisting the data, right? And after the shortlisting or filtering the data, the local computer is sending the data to the cloud computer as well, right? And after that, we are sending that alert message to the local team, right? So that is the basic task for the local computer, right? The fog computer should have an internet connectivity for the cloud communication, right? For doing a cloud communication with a fog computer, we need an internet we need an internet connectivity, right? So all the in-house monitoring team members can access the status of all the sensors from the cloud or the local computer itself, right? So all the in-house monitoring systems team members can access the status of all the sensors from that fog or the local computer itself, right? After that, what is the role of the cloud computer, right? The cloud computer are storing the data which is received from the fog computer, local computer, or this it is receiving the data directly from the sensors too, right? So after that, sensor or after that the cloud is receiving the data, right? After receiving the data, that in the cloud itself we are executing that some of the business logic on that particular data, and we are doing some of the analysis task on that particular stored data, right? And then after that we can take a precautionary step, right? So all those who have right to access to the cloud data can get and result information from it, such as a remote monitoring system, right? So remote monitoring is done by the team members which is having an rights for that accessing that particular cloud, right? After that the data analytics team having a cloud access, right? So with the help of that they can see that all the data which is stored on the cloud, right? After that, what is the role of the caretaker or the data analytics teams, right? So the caretaker and the data analytics teams may execute the correct action based on an analyzed data, right? So based on that analyzed data, the caretaker team or the data analytics team is taking in some of the precautionary step, right? So they are executing that collective actions, right? So they may send the command to the local or the actuators directly and the broadcast alert message to the all of the concerned persons, right? So all the actuator nodes receive that command from the cloud directly or from the controller or the local computer itself, right? So the local analytics processing and the controlling section may not be there in each and every IoT solution, right? So we have already discussed that. So this kind of local analysis processing and the controlling section is having in few of the IoT application. So that's about an overview about an architecture of an any of the IoT application, right? So after that, let's see the IoT application in the healthcare industry, right? So how this IoT, the Internet of Things, is helping the healthcare center, right? The healthcare sector consists of the medical and the related goods and services kind of thing, right? So healthcare sector that is providing us and medical services for maintaining and improving the health, so via the prevention, via the diagnosis, via the treatment and the recovery or the cure of the disease, illness, injury and other physical or the mental harm for the people, right? So we are maintaining the health and we are improving the health with the help of all of this, right? After that the healthcare sector is much diversified and it is full of the opportunity in each and every segment, right? So healthcare sector has many factors such as the healthcare sector is delivered by the health professionals such as the medicines, the dentistry, the pharmacy, nursing, the physio psychology and the other healthcare professionals are the part of the healthcare industry, right? So we can use the IoT application and each and every professional of the healthcare industry, right? So healthcare has become one of the India's largest sector in terms of the revenue as well as the employment. So let's see the importance of the IoT in the healthcare industry, right? So before the Internet of Things, right? So patients' interaction with the doctors were limited to the visits. After evolution of the Internet of the Things, right? So patients do not need to visit to the doctor for interaction, right? Where the IoT is not there, right? So there is no way the doctor or the hospital could monitor the patient's health continuously, right? IoT enabled device have been made remote monitoring in the healthcare sector possible, right? So with the help of the IoT enabled device, we can monitor the health of that patient, right? So with the remote location. The IoT enabled device, right? They have made the remote monitoring in the healthcare sector possible, right? So it is IoT. The IoT is helping to keep the patient safe and healthy. This is that IoT application is empowering that physician to deliver a superlative care, right? So that's about that thing, right? Right? So with the help of the IoT application, we can do the remote monitoring, right? So remote monitoring of the patient's health help in reducing the length of the hospital stay, right? So before when that we are not having a remote monitoring facility at that time that patient must have to stay in that particular hospital for that monitoring systems, right? So for that monitoring, right, even if that patient is not that much critical, then after that patient must have to stay in that particular hospital, right? After evolution of that IoT application and we are having a facility of that remote monitoring, the minor illness or if the patient doesn't have any major issues, then that patient can be monitored with the help of the IoT application remotely, right? So the reducing it, it reducing the length of the hospital stay. So it also preventing the readmission or the re-hospitalization for that any patient, right? So IoT has an application in the healthcare that benefits to the patient itself, right? So here the patient do not require to stay in the hospital for the long time, and it can be monitored remotely, right? So IoT application is helpful for the patient, right? After that, the families, right? So families do not have to take care of that particular patient or that particular relative for that particular thing, right? Even if that patient is critical, then after that families can track his or her health with the help of the remote monitoring system. After that, the physicians and hospitals and the insurance company, right? So that all can get benefit with the help of the IoT application, right? With the help of the IoT application, we can take care of that patients remotely. We can take care, we can make and log and all that thing kind of thing, right? So that is beneficial to all of that particular stakeholders, right? So that's about an importance of an IoT in the healthcare industry, right? So so let's see what is the requirement for an IoT application whenever we are embedded into the healthcare industry, right? So first one is in sensors, right? So for monitoring the patient, we need a heartbeat sensor, oxygen level sensor, the glucose level sensor, and we can have many of the sensors too. Many of the sensors, right? So with the help of that, we can get a data for that particular patient, that particular property, right? After that, we need some controller, right? After sensing the data, that sensors must have to store the data somewhere, right? And the data must need to send to that controllers only, controller also to take an appropriate action, right? So for that, we need some of the controller such as Node MCU, or we can use an Arduino Uno or the Wi-Fi module or the network shield. So that's about a controller, right? So with the help of that controller, we can store the data and analyze the data. After that, if we need some kind of storage location and we need a fog or the local computing, right? So at that time we can use a Raspberry Pi or the PC, right? So that is the basic requirement of the IoT application. After that, we need to connect all that sensors, controllers, fog computing, the cloud computing, all that things, right? So we require LAN and WAN connectivity really effective, right? For that we need a router and the switches, right? So with the help of the router and the switches, we can transfer the data from one device to the another device, right? We need a wireless access point, or we can have a wired LAN too, right? So after that, for the storing and the processing purpose, we need a cloud services, right? So we can use any of the cloud service provider and all that thing. And for the monitoring and the analysis purpose, we need a PC or some kind of screen, or we can use and mobile, and we can use a mobile too, right? So in the mobile screen we can get all the data, right? We can use a mobile, we can use a tablet, we can use a laptop and all that things. So that is a basic requirement for whenever you are building any IoT enabled healthcare application, right? So the basic requirements are sensors, controllers. For the fog computer we are having a Raspberry Pi or the PC, the LAN and the WAN connectivity really good, cloud services, and for the monitoring and the analysis purpose we need some of the devices, right? So some of the gadgets we require. After that, let's see the architecture of the IoT application, right, in the healthcare industry. So first of all, we require the sensors, right? So we can use any of the sensor such as this heartbeat sensor, oxygen sensors, or the glucose sensor, and we can have many more too, right? So that all the sensors are sensing the data, and with the help of the Wi-Fi or any connected devices, that sense data is sent to the controller node. So that controller node is having a patient wise node, right? So each and every patient's data that we are getting from that particular sensor that we are storing into the so we are getting into the microcontroller node, right? After that, that controller node is sending the data to the to the fog computer, right? So with the help of the Wi-Fi or the LAN, right? So that sensors are connected with the controller wirelessly, and that microcontroller, that controller node is connected with the fog computer or the with the cloud with the help of the Wi-Fi or the LAN, right? So within an organization, for the local analytics and the processing task, we require fog computers, right? And if we use a fog computing or the local computing, at that time we require a local caretaker monitoring system, right? So nursing staff and the doctors are using that local caretaking monitoring system, right? So that nursing staff and the doctor can see that actual evolution of that particular patient's history, right? After that, that fog computer is connected with the cloud, right? And with the help of the internet, we can deploy our all the data or our analyzed data to the cloud, right? So cloud service provider is central and the it is providing an central and the remote storage and the analytics tools, right? So with the help of the cloud services, we can store the data on the cloud and we can process that too. After that, what if we don't need any local caretaking monitoring system? If we require a remote caretaker monitoring system, at that time we can use that particular cloud services, right? So with the help of the internet, we can get all the information from that particular cloud, right? So that nursing staff and the doctors can get the data from that cloud, right? Which is get from that particular all that sensors, right? And if that patient's family, right? So that's about an nursing and the doctor staff, right? After that, what if that patient's family or its relatives want to see the patient's history or its evolution remotely, right? So at that time, that patients and its family is getting is given some of the credential, right? And with the help of that, they can get and all the evolution or the history of that particular patient with the help of some of the cloud services, right? And after that, the research and the decision making team is taking data from that particular cloud services, right? And they can use the data analytics tool on that particular stored data, right? On that particular stored data, right? So that's all about a basic architecture of any IoT application in the healthcare industry, right? After that, let's see how it's work, right? So all the sensor nodes should be placed on the patient's body either directly or using it with the help of the wearables, right? So now the wearables are embedded with the heartbeat sensor, oxygen level sensors and all that things, right? So we can place that particular sensor directly onto the patient's body or we can embed it into the wearables, right? That sensor node should have an Wi-Fi connectivity with a microcontroller of the patient, right? So that sensor node should have an Wi-Fi connectivity. So that sensor node should have an Wi-Fi connectivity with that controller node of the patient, right? So the sensor node sends the sense data to the controller node. The controller nodes collect the data from all of the sensors, right? After applying the sum of the business logic on that particular data as per the requirement, that is sending the data to the fog computing, right? And all the controller nodes of that patient should have been connected with the fog computer network, right? So without that we cannot store the data locally, right? After that, the fog computer is receiving all the data from that controller node, right? It is executing some of the business logic and do some of the analytics and collecting the data, right? After doing that particular thing, right, that filter data is sending to that filter limited data is sending to that particular cloud computing, right, for the storage and the processing task, right? After applying some of the business logic, right, it is having a filter limited data, right, which is sent it to the cloud, right? Right, so that and after that which is sending the alert message to the caretaker of the team such as nursing staff and the doctor, right? So after applying some of the business logic, right, if it need giving any alert message, right, so it is sending that message to the caretaker team such as nursing staff and the doctor. The fog computer needs a really nice internet connectivity for the cloud communication, right? So all the local caretaker team members can be access health status for that particular patient from that fog computer itself, right? And if they need a remote location or if they need a remote analysis, right, so at that time they can use a cloud system, right? So the cloud is used to store all the data that is received from that fog computers, right? So that cloud is executing some of the business logic and that is doing an analytics task and store that data, right? That is store that filter data. All those who have an rights to access that particular cloud data can get an health records of that particular patients, like remote caretaker team members can access the data, the data analytics team that can get that particular data, and the patient's family members can also get the data of that particular evolution of that particular patient The caretaker and the data analytics teams may execute the corrective action based on the data and the alert messages, right? So that's how that IoT application is working. So that's how we can embed that healthcare industry with the IoT, right? So let's have a quick summary about the healthcare industry and the IoT. So IoT has changed the people's life by enabling the constant tracking of the health condition, right? So with the help of the IoT, we can track the health condition of the patients constantly, right? After that, the wearable connected devices like blood pressure and the heart rate monitoring, cough, glucometer, all that are giving the patient's attention, right? Or any changes in that routine activity of the person, the alert message is sent to the family members and the health service provider, right? The IoT enables the healthcare professionals to be more watchful, right? So they can have and watch remotely at the locally, right? So data collected from the any IoT devices can help the physician identify that based treatment process, right? And IoT device tagged with an sensors are used for tracking the real-time location and the medical equipment like wheelchairs, the nebulizer, the oxygen pumps and other monitoring equipments, right? And it is also help in the asset management such as the pharmacy inventory control and the environmental monitoring, for instance the checking the refrigeration temperature and all that kind of thing, right? So that's how we can use an IoT in the healthcare industry, right? So that's all about today's session. Thank you for the watching.